G'day punters, welcome to the Punters Academy episode 6. We're here after a great weekend's racing in Sydney and Melbourne. Obviously a couple of races that we're going to dissect later in the show. Today will be 2 parts and we'll start off with questions. The first question comes in from Matt. Hi Paul, enjoying the show. Just had a quick question. With staking to betting to 4% of your bank, do you ever back more than one horse in a race? That's the first question. If so, what sort of parameters do you set around this? Pretty open-ended question, but is there a percentage of the market where this becomes a no bet or just a top selection is bet? And if you are betting 2 horses in a race, is that for either 4% or is this halved? So I just thought I'd cover off those points first, Matt, and then pass over to John and get his views on it. First bit, betting to win 4%. Do I back more than one horse in a race? Yes, on occasions. Most of my bets are single bets in a race, but there are occasions upon which I will bet. Importantly though, and I really need to stress this again, it's betting to collect 4% of your bank, not win 4%. If I'm betting to win, I'm massively overstaking because I go from, say, on an even money chance from having 2% of my bank to having 4% of my bank. Mm-hmm. And if you do that, you're going to go broke. So that's the first part of it. What sort of parameters or what sort of situations come about where I do actually bet more than one horse? Look, it could be in a situation where I've got a horse that I'm not quite sure about. I could price it, say, anywhere between, for example, $5 and $10. There might be a few question marks around it. The market gives me a positive lead, backs it from, say, $11 into $8, and I might then go, okay, well, I don't want to lose on the race if this horse wins, so I back the horse, but I'm taking the market price as my staking point. I'm not trying to sort of rely on a price because I'm not sure of it to begin with. The other scenario is where a horse is first up, or what I would deem a market horse, a horse that I'm not sure about. Often I might back and save my stake on that sort of season scenario. But other than that...
so not every bet you have to win 4%?
No, every bet I'm having is to win, or most of my bets are having to win, to collect 4%.
Yeah, to collect 4%. Yeah.
Of my bank based on my price. If I'm backing more than one horse and it's a scenario where I want to be on it if there's a positive lead, I could have it anywhere between $5 and $10, like I suggested. The market comes through it, it's $11 and $8. I'll back it to collect 4%.
At the $8. At the $8. Not at your $5 price or whatever.
Because that $5 price could be 10.
Yeah, correct.
So I'm not sure, so I'm saying, okay, the market's right.
Yeah.
They're giving me the positive lead and they're right about the price. And then obviously I'll set the distribution of my market and rejig the rest of the prices. If it's just a first up horse or a first starter and I think it's trialled okay and I don't want to lose on it, I might be having a decent sized bet in the race, then I'll just save my stake on it at the market price to collect 4%.
Yes.
So they're the sort of different scenarios whereby I will vary. I think I might have said this before, if it's a really high confidence race and I really like the horse and I can't be any more negative on it and I've got it marked $2.50 and they're betting $3, then I'll up my bet. So I might bet to collect 5% or 6%. Probably no more than about 6.5% though. That would be about as high as I go.
Off your rated price, correct?
Off my rated price. So if I've got it $2.50 and it's $3, instead of having my normal bet on it, I'll increase that bet to collect more. But I think we talked about it last time.
There is a cap, and it's not, and it's never to win. It's always to collect.
Always to collect based on my assessed price. So I'm still getting the overlay. I'm still getting the benefit of the market pricing it longer than my price, but just in a more structured manner and an efficient manner and a correct manner mathematically.
Yep.
So John, do you want to?
No, nothing I can really add there because I do it a little. I said it's definitely sort of more targeted at you, and it all makes sense to me. And I pretty much asked the questions that I would have asked if I was this person. So yep, that's all makes sense.
So Matt, thanks for those questions. And if we haven't answered it well enough, and you want to contact me separately, feel free to do that, and we'll go from there. Next one comes from Gaza, and he's got a couple of questions in this. I'm after a bit of help regarding horses returning from a spell, i.e. first uppers. I noticed on Saturday just past. Now, this was about 2 weeks ago, so I have to apologise, Gaza. We didn't see that question on the email. It slipped through the net, so this is talking about 2 weeks ago. There were just over 90 horses resuming at Metro, South Australia, New South Wales, Queensland and Victoria, and which there were only 8 winners. My questions are approximately in lengths. what do you penalise them, A, for age? Well, I don't penalise them for age. That doesn't factor in. Age is something that's built into my rating in terms of age improvement, going from, say, a 2-year-old to a 3-year-old or 3-year-old to an older horse. I don't penalise it for age as such. Second question, for days since the last run. Well, that depends on the horse's previous patterns. It depends on just how long that break is. It depends on the trainer. It depends on what sort of trials it's had, what sort of distance, what sort of jockey's engaged. There can be variables there that signify an issue or a potential issue, in which case I might be a little bit more aggressive, in which case I might take anywhere between 1 and 3 lengths off a similar peak rating over a similar distance from, say, the most recent preparation. And we're just talking generally here. If it's a stayer resuming, well, obviously I'll be harder on it. So in lengths, it's 1 to 2 lengths in terms of fitness penalties is pretty standard, depending on the situation, but it could be as much as 5 lengths. I mean, it just depends. And it also depends on the pricing model you're using too. Like, what is the effect of a length penalty? Now, what does that do to your price? Does that make it $10 to $20, or is your distribution tighter and it only goes from $10 to $14? In which case, everything I'm talking about needs to be upped.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So, distance to run today, look, that's probably more relevant given the horse's exposed form, trial distances, jockeys engaged in those trials, etc., etc. So it's not just it's first up 1400, it can't win.
Yes.
A lot of that depends on
any intent trials, that sort of thing. Yeah, there's all sorts of things to carry. Weight to carry first up. Any adjustment for weight, Gaza, that I make is already built into my rating, so I don't consider it as a secondary issue. So it doesn't matter to me whether it's 60 kilos or 51 kilos. It's all built in, so whatever the rating is that I'm looking at for the upcoming race, every single past rating is normalised for the conditions of today's race. So that's distance, weight, etc. And that's obviously factoring in things like claims and so forth. So I don't really need to give it a second thought from that point of view. I noticed that the majority of horses that won first up that day were classier animals, and that most were under 200 days since last run. That may have been the situation on that day. That's not always going to be the situation. I wouldn't read anything into that. I wouldn't try to formulate. It's this time of year for that sort of thing to happen a lot more too. Just horses resuming in races where they're just better than other horses that have been up and going at this time of year. So it's
and in better class races, and I put something on Twitter the other day about this. Don't be put off by backing horses first up into stronger races. So your benchmark 95 plus, your listed, your group races. In fact, there's actually a market advantage backing those horses resuming from a spell, because the market overcompensates you dramatically. The strike rate isn't necessarily any better.
No, just the price.
But the prices are better. So don't be put off. If you like a horse and it ticks your boxes, don't let that single element put you off, especially in the better races.
Yeah,
what do you think, John?
I agree with that. It's just the better races, it should be the opposite, because horses are better prepared usually to enter. They're not in those races usually unless you get a case like Winks on Saturday or something with the stayers just sort of going through the motions, which are pretty easy to identify. But the bigger races, the horses are usually better prepared for them, and that's why they're in them. So it kind of makes sense. Yeah, I think it's all. None of these, they all sort of add in together for me when you're sort of trying to penalise or look for a horse first up. That it's definitely a hard one to give a set rule to, I would imagine.
I think the key is when you're pricing, if you are pricing, is be flexible with those types of runners. Have it in mind what you've done.
And understand that the market's already penalising them.
That's right, for being first up. Hence why they tend to overcompensate sometimes in price, especially on those better races.
Yes.
But have it in the back of your mind as to just how much you've applied to it as a penalty, and then let the market guide you a little too. So if you're,
don't be set in your ways.
Don't be saying I'm right. 2 lengths is exact.
Yeah, because it's so hard to be right on a horse first up, and the market obviously tends to know, especially late, tends to know more than you do about that horse.
Exactly. So if you're $5 and the market's $5, and then late in the last 2 minutes, 3 minutes, suddenly it's $7, $8.
Yes.
Don't think that your $5 price line is it, and rubber stamp because you've taken a length or 2 lengths off.
Yes.
Put it to market and see what else that exposes. And maybe it could put you on a late bet, it could put you on a late saver,
Yes.
Or it might just simply reduce your bet on that horse from being a normal stake horse to maybe a saver bet.
And if you've had a set against it at the 5 and it's firming, you want to entertain it more definitely, or exactly.
And the opposite applies, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, Gaza, I think that covers most of your stuff. So we'll go on to a question from Andrew. Hi guys, loving the new show. I've got a question regarding track walking. Do you both reckon there's an edge for those that do it? Andrew, from my point of view, I've got tools in my database that allow me to historically interrogate things like tracks and rail positions and historical patterns. So I sort of go into a meeting with some sort of an expectation of what it's going to do. Secondly, the tool that I use, Verify Race Day Track Condition in Axis, allows me to pinpoint the bias and probably patterns more accurately and more precisely and in a more timely fashion than what the general market might account for. And we might, this will sort of lead in towards Saturday, I think, John, in terms of a question we got a bit later on about tracks and how Randwick played Saturday, and
Yes.
and what sort of conclusions might have been drawn from people looking at early races and whether or not they actually panned out. So, but I do believe it could be an edge, sure. If you're specialising in an area and you've got someone to do that for you who knows what they're doing, and you're doing it consistently, and I think that's the key. There's no point doing it, once a month, once a week. You've got to be doing it all the time.
Yes.
I think that, there certainly can be an edge, but that's just another way of carving it out. I can afford to be a little bit more lax in not trying to get people to do that because it's just too much of a logistical issue, and relying on what the data's telling me and what I'm seeing.
Absolutely. Like I think it causes more problems than not. It's interesting when there's major changes to tracks, like I said, when they dug the Kensington track up in Randwick and things like that. It's probably worthwhile, if possible, getting a look at it yourself or someone you trust. But week to week, if there's no changes, the patterns are pretty solid as far as I'm concerned. It's only when there's major changes to like redoing or something, drainage works or things like that actual tracks change. Otherwise, they're pretty consistent and they play that way. It's all just a matter of keeping an eye on it over time and trusting it, and then obviously looking at it early in meetings. I don't think there would be an edge, but I don't think it's definitely not worthwhile from my point of view.
My problem is logistics. Like you walk Rose Hill this week. What about Randwick next week? We can't make that. What about Canterbury the week after? That's the problem you've got. Anything that you do has to be able to be replicated across the board in order for it to be meaningful.
And when do you do it too? Like you're basically going to do it race day morning. They don't let many people on tracks race day morning unless you've got a jockey that can walk it for you or something. They're not going to let too many people out there. There's a lot that can happen between Friday afternoon and Saturday morning, and you're much better off, from my point of view, relying on history to tell you what's going to happen. And even if you lob out there at 6 o'clock in the morning, there's a lot of drying happens between 6 and 1, so it's
depending on the weather and the wind.
And if you change all of your thoughts on what you get on the race morning, or from someone doing their best to try and help you, it can definitely send you into a spin. I'd much rather trust history and how it's played previously than an opinion well before an event, which is kind of the only way you can do it.
Yeah, relying on solid data, Andrew. So the second part of your question, do you guys have someone that does it for you, or do we do it ourselves? The answer is no, I don't.
Yeah.
I use the data and the tools to drive my decision making. John's pretty much the same.
Yeah, I'll ask the boys. Like I get lucky, I get a bit of a sort of Tim or Josh head out there. If there's something weird going on, if it's a track that they've got queries over, whether it's going to be wet, dry, things that you might want to know, I get a bit of access to them. So it's handy to ask them. But it's only, it might be once every 3 months I might seek their opinion on a track or something like that if they've gone for a look. But it's not every meeting, that's for sure.
Okay. Thanks, Andrew. Next one's from Mark, who asked us on Twitter, what do you guys make of the 3-year-olds from the weekend, looking ahead, i.e. like Merchant Navy, how Randwick played, etc., etc.? Well, Randwick we're going to cover in more detail at the end of the show, but essentially on our figures it was a firm 2, and we'll talk more about it at the end. As far as Merchant Navy goes, Look, its time improved, certainly, after Saturday's performance. The issue for that, though, is that the previous runs, it had never been in a race with any early speed. So the times were misleading.
What was the race like on Saturday, as in times?
Look, they went... they went... look, I don't remember the exact figure on this race.
On this race, yeah, because I didn't see this one either. Yeah. It didn't look like they went overly quick, and they had that headwind, which was an advantage to it.
Yeah.
The other horse that was hard in the market sat 3 wide, facing the breeze.
Yep.
I think the leader was in... The other horse that was in the betting was behind the leader and sort of ran up its arse, which had the Sydney form trekking. So it kind of looked like it had plenty of favours, Merchant Navy.
Yeah, I think it was... I think it was a little bit above, like a couple of lengths above average.
For the overall time?
Yeah, overall time.
So there was merit in the race, but it didn't have the best merit in the race.
No,
the winner.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely not. I mean, it was suited by the pace shape of the race, I'm suspecting. And,
yes.
And we'll get more clarification around that when we get the actual...
Yeah, because I did the race without the times, and it just looked like Booker or whatever, the thing that the filly that sat 3 wide was a better run. I thought Trekking was handled pretty well in Sydney, even though it came out of a fairly strong race and was a bit unlucky. Like he just lost all momentum chasing that leader and ran up its backside, and Merchant Navy's just exposed at the right time and really chimed in and did everything, had everything in its favour to win. And it's had that, as you're saying, every start. Basically, well, it's not proven that it's...
The true test of ability is obviously the ability to run fast time.
Yes.
And do it more than
under pressure.
Do it under pressure. So previously that race at Flemington, they went out 8 lengths slow to the 800. The Sandown race prior to that, they went out 6.5 lengths slow to the 800 over the same sectional distance. That day at Sandown, the inside was compromised. The horse came in the better part of the track. Sure, it's got ability. Yes, it's improved. But
hard to gauge it.
What do we make of those earlier runs in terms of their true test? Look, I think that there are plenty of 3-year-olds ahead of it at the moment.
Yeah, so it won out. I don't know, when you're saying other 3, I did a bit of a thing yesterday going through looking at the Golden Rose, and I haven't looked at your other questions. I think this race, Super X, is sort of a little bit different, but I think the Sydney 3-year-olds, the Minaris, the Gold Standards, Addictive Natures are all ahead of it. Assimilate, I heard, going straight into it. Pariah's interesting. I don't know if he'll line up against it, but he's a great horse going forward. He's not saying sort of the Golden Rose in particular. No. But I think the Sydney 3-year-olds, it's interesting formalities lined up, but the fillies look a little bit behind the Colts. And I thought that the horse, the one that's run third, Bjorn's horse, going mentally blank, Champagne Cuddles has been dead stiff not to beat her twice in a row. Yep. So I think the Sydney form's better than the Melbourne form
at this stage. I think the one from Melbourne is probably catchy.
Well, and it was a bit unlucky the other day, wasn't it? When it was a bit
Tulip as well has got some.
Yeah, Hayes seems to be the only one with 3-year-olds that really look dangerous coming up to attack us.
I think so, and I think the other Sydney 3-year-olds are probably 2 to 3 lengths. The better ones I'm talking about. 2 to 3 lengths below Minari at this stage.
Yeah. So this week's a great test, obviously, when you've got Minari, Pariah. Who else is going to be that? Siege of Quebec goes again. They're the sort of benchmark horses going against each other, the two of them. Yeah. And they look to have it between them at the moment. But it is a great 3-year-old year, and there's plenty that have got coming off wet form and all sorts of weird things that can improve rapidly. So it's going to be the next 6 weeks. It'll be very interesting.
It'll tell us a lot more, won't it?
Yeah, absolutely. This weekend's going to tell us a lot more.
Yeah. So I think, Mark, that sort of covers your question.
Kind of.
I think we'll have a bit of a break now and come back for part 2 shortly. But please don't forget, send all your questions through by email to paul@thepuntersacademy.com.au. Sometimes we can miss them on Twitter pretty easily, so if you can send them by email, that would be appreciated, and also get them in early too, so we can plan our answers.
Better. Sorry that I've missed a couple of this week that are late, but that's thanks for that.
Thanks, guys.